Hello, it's Vicar Ezekiel Grabau, and today is Tuesday of Lent 4, and we're continuing on with our hymn, O dearest Jesus, what law hast thou broken? Which is LSB 439. Let's listen to stanza 2. Here we pick up with what we left off with in stanza 1. Stanza 1 had this important question. Why did Jesus deserve to die, to receive this sharp sentence, a death penalty? And now we see that sentence being carried out. They crown thy head with thorns, they smite, they scourge thee. With cruel mockings to the cross they urge thee. The death sentence is a sentence of crucifixion, one that comes with mocking and cruel treatment and scourging, a terrible punishment inflicted on prisoners and criminals. You've probably seen and heard a little bit about this, but when we say scourge, it's not just a beating or being whipped. They had these terrible things. I forget the name that they had for them. It might have been Hydra's head or something like that. But it was a bunch of leather strips and often with pieces of metal or bone in it so that it would break skin and it would hurt a lot. If you've seen the movie The Passion, they do this in a really, really bloody fashion. It might not have been quite that bloody, but it certainly would have hurt a lot and broken the skin and caused bleeding and terrible, terrible pain. So, along with this terrible pain of scourging and being crucified, Jesus is also undergoing cruel mockings and mistreatment. This first couple of lines describes almost exactly what Mark records following Pilate's sentence. This is from Mark chapter 15, and we're starting with verse 15. And I gotta find my place here. There we go. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. And the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole battalion, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisted together a crown of thorns, they put it on him. And they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him, and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple robe and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. It's worth noting that in this stanza, at least, and we're going to get more about what's going on in the coming stanzas, but just looking at this stanza, there is a lack of any sort of poetic interpretation. There's little details, and we'll get to those in a bit, that are sort of directing us to think in a certain way. But for the most part, this whole stanza is simply eyewitness testimony. This is what's happening. This is what's going on. And all in the present tense. As we noted with the previous stanza, this whole hymn is directed to Jesus in the midst of his sufferings. So even this stanza is describing all the things as if we're walking along with them, standing with Jesus on his way out to Golgotha to be crucified, seeing everything that is happening to him, and simply describing it back to him, saying what we are seeing. And that has a pretty heavy effect on us, especially in combination with the music. If we didn't have the music at all, this would be, we wouldn't quite know what we're supposed to feel. From the amount of times we've been taught about Jesus' suffering and death, we might have an idea of what we're supposed to feel. But this hymn on its own, the music often conveys the feeling more than anything, especially with this second line, the way that it sort of crescendos up and finds some of its highest notes there, almost sounds like these wails, these outcries. It almost mimics the scene of Jesus being led out to Golgotha, and we're told in Luke's gospel that there were certain women who were following him and wailing and bemoaning that he was being put to death. And so we're sort of occupying that space, following along Jesus and seeing all the things that he's suffering. And the music goes even further here in the next few lines. They give thee gall to drink, they still decry thee, they crucify thee. So the rhythms here are really interesting, and the way the music plays with those rhythms are really cool. So again, if you notice in the bottom right corner there, right under the name of the tune, which I won't attempt to pronounce because it is again in German, but right under that name of the tune, we have the lines, which is 11, 11, 11, 5. So this last line here, they crucify thee. And in other stanzas, like the last stanza we had, what dark transgression. That usually stands alone as its own thought, this sort of concluding idea. And it's worth noting the way the music works here. So in the last long line we have, they give thee gall to drink, they still decry thee. That third line, that penultimate line, descends. It goes down and down. You have the first half of it that goes down, and then it goes up a little bit again, and then goes down, back down again. And it has this sort of dour, turning down of the head almost effect. And then we make nearly a full octave jump for that last line, which gives it this sort of punch, this loud outcry. And it pulls us into this feeling, this shame and anger even, upsetness, sorrow, I would say, over what's going on and what we're seeing. But it's not just the music that carries some of the stuff going on here. I'll point out before I go to some of the specifics of this second half of the stanza that there is no identification of the people who are doing these things to Jesus. We heard from Mark that it's specifically the soldiers who are doing most of the things in the first half, crowning him with thorns, smiting and scourging him, smiting being a word for striking someone, so they were striking him with the reed and they scourged his back, cruelly mocking him, urging him to the cross. All those things are things the soldiers do. And most of these things still are the soldiers, the gall to drink, but then we have they still decry thee, which is not exactly the work of the soldiers. They mock him, but the word decry means basically to condemn someone, to say this person is a liar. In the case of Jesus, it's people saying that he's a false Christ, that he's really not the Son of God. And we see that especially in the passersby, the people who are walking past, and some of the religious authorities as well, who stand at the foot of Jesus' cross and mock him and say, if you're really the Son of God, come down from there and we'll believe in you. He who helped others can't even help himself. And even one of the thieves on the cross said much the same. So the they here, and then our last bit, they crucify thee. We could make the argument that's exclusively the work of the soldiers. They're the people who are carrying out the sentence. They're the ones actually crucifying him. But remember, the whole crowd are the people who cried out for him to be crucified and told Pilate, this is specifically in Matthew's account, that his blood would be on them and their children. So the work of crucifixion, although carried out by the soldiers, is the work of the whole crowd. So the they is being obtuse here. We don't see the individual faces. We don't see the Roman soldiers. We don't see the Jewish authorities. We don't see this whole crowd. We don't see the thief on the cross. All we really see is Jesus and us. the I, the person who is saying the poetry, the speaker, who is you and I, the people singing this hymn, in a personal manner, in a singular manner, and we'll see that especially later on when we sort of consider these things in the first person singular, how these things apply to me, what am I to do? We are the only people other than Jesus that are clearly identifiable. Everyone else is sort of fades into the background. There are things happening to Jesus, but our eyes are fixed on Jesus and what's happening to him. It's a conversation between him and us. And they is actually not so important. They're not the focus. This is a marked difference between some other hymns, especially My Song is Love Unknown, which there's a lot of parallels between that hymn and this hymn in theming. But this is a difference where My Song is Love Unknown considers how mankind is acting, and then we put ourselves in their shoes. But in this case, we don't even necessarily think that much about what those people are doing. It's all about Jesus and I. It's a very, very different dynamic. So to look at some of the individual details here that might need to explain, they give the gall to drink. This is a minute detail recorded especially in Matthew and Mark, where before they crucified Jesus, they gave him bitter wine mixed with gall, which I think actually in Matthew and Mark, they just say bitter wine. And the assumption there is it's the gall that's making it bitter. So gall is a set of herbs that was often put into drinks. And the idea is it's like a painkiller. It's something that you give. It tastes terrible, but it also is supposed to be sort of this numbing agent. The idea is the crucifixion is a very painful process, and you're in pain the whole time. So they give you this painkiller, not so much to make you feel better, but as much to make you last longer, for the punishment to be extended. Because that's the whole idea of crucifixion. It's a nasty way to kill somebody, because the idea is not an execution, but a slow example being made. Someone put up on a pole that people can walk by and see them hanging there, slowly dying. And it's supposed to be this image of justice and what happens to criminals. So they want people to last a long time on the cross and to be able to suffer under that pain for a long time. But Jesus takes a sip, but doesn't drink it. And most of the time, the way that this is interpreted is that Jesus doesn't want to dull the pain. He wants to be right-headed because he has things to do on the cross. There's many things that he has to say, and there's much suffering that he has to undergo, and he can't dull that pain. The whole point of what Jesus is doing is that he's not avoiding the suffering. He's facing it head on for our sakes. And we've explained a little bit this decrying, that it's coming from all quarters. The religious authorities, the crowd, even one of the people who's dying on the cross next to him is making fun of him, saying he must not be the Christ because he's not helping them. And it all culminates in this one great cry that we have, which is helped along by the music. They crucify thee. And it really sums up everything that Jesus suffers. And so in this stanza, it's really heavy, hard to bear when you really start to think about these things. And we're going to have this unpacked even further in the next few stanzas, where we're going to talk about all of this suffering. What purpose is it for? Why is Jesus willingly enduring these things? Why is he undergoing all these things? If he didn't deserve to die, which we established in the first stanza, and yet he's suffering such great things, what is the point? Why is it happening? That's what we're going to consider in the next few stanzas. God's blessings.